So I'm Doug Webster. I'm in the planning department with the town of Gray. I've been with the town 17 years, hard to believe. And I have been asked to propose some new zoning for the outer periphery, what I call the outer periphery of town. There's a separate project, the VTP, the Village Transformation Project, that is focusing on the, focusing on the village core. And what I've attempted to do is to propose some zoning districts on the outer periphery and leaving the village core to be as a separate undertaking. And once there's a bit more closure, consensus on the village, we will fill in, if you will, the areas in between the village and the outer periphery. Happy to answer any questions. I want to finish with introductions here. This is Al Schaefer.
Hi, how are you?
Al is a GIS consultant and a forester. And
I live here in town. We moved here about 30 some odd years ago, and kids came up through the school district, and I've got a stake in all this too. So I'm not just somebody from the outside that didn't have some kind of vested interest in all this coming together.
And the maps that we're going through are represent input from the comprehensive plan, from town staff, the ordinance advisory committee, and the town council. It's taken a lot of people. I guess I'm the one that's doing the presentation, but there are a lot of people behind the scenes that have been contributing to this. And sure, yes,
Just
I'm sorry.
for your information, folks, we're going to be using GIS technology, and some of you, I'm sure, remember back in elementary school, the teacher put up an overhead projector in the class, had pieces of plastic, and she wrote on, or he wrote on them, and these things stacked up. Well, we're going to do the same thing digitally. We've got a bunch of different layers to show you, to help you understand how Doug came to some of his conclusions for his proposals that he's presenting tonight. Okay? It's a really good application of a fairly new technology. Okay?
Good.
I'm good, yeah.
Good. So this is the second of 3 meetings. The first meeting was a week ago Monday at St. Gregory's, as I mentioned. There's a third meeting on February 24th, I think it is, at Pennell. And 24th? Yes, Monday the 24th, and that'll be in the council chambers at Town Hall. Our main purpose of the meeting tonight is to solicit input from residents and property owners and business owners in town. Sure, okay. Okay, and so, let's see, I assume everyone's received our snazzy postcard, and some of them went out a teeny bit later than we had hoped, but hopefully you've received those. The postcard contained a QR code which enabled you to go to the town portion of the town website where there was quite a bit of background information that I put on there to try to help folks understand the background and the various steps that we took to create these maps. So how many people have had a chance to look at the town website so far? Quite a few. Good, great. There's quite a bit of information there, I think, and we did our level best to have it be in a user-friendly format. This meeting's being recorded, thanks to Kyle. When we get to the questions and comments, we had a little bit of trouble with the quality of the recording for the workshop that we had at St. Gregory's. So after our presentation, I'm going to take this portable mic and put it right here. So if you have questions, please come up here to increase the quality of the recording. And let's see. So we'll spend probably half hour or so going through the background information and how the maps were created. And let's see. For those that have not, I'm going to trip up myself, aren't I? For those that have not had the benefit of looking at perhaps all of the sections of the town website, the way zoning works, it's sort of three different tiers, if you will. The highest up tier is what they call the Growth Management Act. It's a state statute. And the state's Growth Management Act directs municipalities to determine growth areas and rural areas and transition areas. So that's, and then all the municipalities in the state of Maine write and adopt a comprehensive plan. And hopefully that comprehensive plan is consistent with the Growth Management Act. The comprehensive plan is the middle level, and then the comprehensive plan is utilized to create a zoning map. And the zoning map, so it's sort of a three-tiered system. The zoning map in a municipality is supposed to be consistent with a comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan is supposed to be consistent with the Growth Management Act. They all kind of connect together. The basic blueprint for the new zoning, as I said, is in the comp plan. It's the future land use map, and there's an accompanying description. On the back of the agenda is the future land use plan, and that is the very broad brushstrokes that the voters approved in the presidential election in the fall of 2020. So that is that is the most essential element that was utilized for the purposes of creating the zoning that I've worked on. And you'll see the shape of the polygons on that of the future. There were too many colors on there, or there are enough colors already, but we did retain the shape of the polygons for the future land use map on all the maps. And you can see them right here. They're on all the maps. And so if you're wondering where the proposed zoning fits in relation to the future land use map in the comp plan, that's why we retained them on all of the maps.
This might help you see the dashed lines are the lines that Doug is talking about. I just took off the layer that shows the parcels from 2023. I just want to add the parcel layer is a couple of years old, so there's been some development in grade in the last couple of years, so not every parcel is going to be right on the money. And bear in mind too, folks, that parcel maps or tax maps are not engineering grade or survey grade boundaries, okay? Matter of fact, none of the GIS data we're going to present tonight is engineering grade data. Soil Water Conservation Service, National Hydrology, all these different agencies have their own data, but it's not engineering grade, okay? But it's an industry standard. It's what people use for maps like this for this purpose, okay? But if you have any questions about the data, feel free to ask, okay? I'll put these parcels back on just so that you can see them again, okay?
So on the town's website, the QR code, if you don't use the QR code, you go to the home page, you go to departments, you go to community development, and then on the left-hand side, there's a icon right in the middle. Kyle calls it a cabinet, which I've never heard, but and it says proposed non-village zoning. And once you click on, and there are 7 different subsets to that. That's the introductory page. And at the bottom of that introductory page, there is a link to submit comments. And there are other links that direct you to more detailed information depending on what you're trying to better understand. So my basic mission was to address the outer periphery of gray and take the future land use lines and create a draft of a zoning map for public input. This is the 3rd draft. There were 2 other drafts that I put together. They both received input from the Gray Town Council as well as town staff and the Ordinance Advisory Committee. So this represents the 3rd draft. After the 3rd draft, the council understandably said, we would like to solicit some input from the public and property owners and business owners as to what they think. And all of that input, the notes from these meetings and any comments that get submitted on the link that Kyle provided on the town's website, all of that information will go to the council for their consideration. Tentatively, it's looking like the beginning of April. And so that information will be considered by the council, and they will decide at that point how to move forward. So as pointed out on the website, and for those that have seen these maps, the maps do look quite busy and they can be a little bit overwhelming, but just like with anything, if you break it down into individual pieces, it's a lot more understandable. So what we'd like to do now is go through the map compilation process layer by layer. We're going to start with the development constraints map, the second one from the left there. And that is, I'll put that together with readily available data. There were 3, and we're not to the compilation of the proposed zoning map yet, but there were 3 primary elements that were utilized for the drawing of the lines: development constraints, property lines, and the third one is escaping me. And the future land use, of course, the future land use plan. So what we'd like to do now is to kind of go layer by layer for the development constraints map. And what we did at Dry Mills, it seemed to work out well, was to start with town-wide, and then we can zoom in and put the layers together for the Libby Hill area.
Okay, just for a second. You guys tell us what works better for you and your view. I know your screens are a little small. We want to show you the whole town, but when I do that, I don't have complete control how much I zoom in and out. Which is better, this or this here, where you're seeing a vast majority of the town? You tell me what works better. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, great. Thank you. So that's the aquifers.
Okay. So the aquifers are first, okay. Aquifers, for those that have been in town for a while, there used to be the aquifer overlay zone that fell out of political favor. Pretty shortly after that was repealed, the town understandably adopted the current wellhead districts, which are based on the travel time to the water district wellhead. So the aquifers, you'll see later, aquifers are proposed to be an overlay district, but aquifers are a development constraint because they can potentially contaminate the groundwater, as Adam rightfully said at the Dry Mills, the lake underground.
Yeah.
So that was great. So that's aquifers.
Yep.
Great.
Want to go into wetlands?
Sure. Yep. And there are 2 different types of wetlands that are shown here. The lighter green are the forested wetlands. The darker green are open wetlands. Throughout the development constraints, we made an effort to, the darker the shade, the more of a impediment challenge the development constraints. You'll see that with the soils. The soils that are not good for septic system are a darker color. So in general, the darker the color, the more of a development constraint you have. So those are the wetlands right there. You can see the gray flats as an example. You've got the outer portion that's the forested wetland, and then the open area that we're all familiar with. Those are wetlands.
Ready for soils?
Soils, okay. So the soils show up as a diagonal line. You can see those, and obviously there's a correlation between poorly drained soils and wetlands, and there's some overlap. That was one of the biggest challenges that we had actually putting this map together, was how do we show all this information while you can hopefully still see the parcels. So that's just the first layer, is it, or is that both?
That's soils.
Soils.
2 layers, yep.
Both-
Poorly drained and very poorly drained.
Okay, so that's both layers of soils right there. And next is slopes.
Before I open up the slopes, I think some of you folks understand what a percent slope is. If you're talking about a 10% slope, what that means is for every 100 feet of horizontal distance, you you have a 10-foot vertical, up or down, okay? I think most roads for trucks, the maximum you go is 10% grade. That's usually for traffic. So what we have here is, first of all, a 10 to 15% slope, and then we have over 15% slopes. And the over 15 is the bigger squares, I believe they're red, and the 10 to 15 is the, I'll confess to being a little colorblind, so I can't tell you what color. Probably Doug can tell you that better than I can. But they're the smaller squares on the map.
It's almost like a pink and a tighter grid, and then a larger grid and the red. And there's a key on the third page of your handout for this, so you can see what we're talking about here. So that is soils. After that are IF&W or state protected areas, vernal pools, what is it? Endangered, threatened.
Yeah, the vernal pools, I should clarify, not every little bowl in the woods that stays wet most of the summer is a vernal pool. There's a set of stipulations that require certain species of insect and freshwater shrimp to be qualified as a certain vernal pool. So we have those on there, but also the ESTC is endangered species and species of concern as set up by the State Inland Fishery and Wildlife, beginning with Habitat Group. They don't reveal, unless you really, really want to know, what the species are that's involved. If you look down here, there's quite an area. I don't know what that is. And they would rather not say what that is, because it's already being designated as a tender area in terms of wildlife or species, plant species too. They don't want people traipsing in there and, destroying the thing they're kind of trying to preserve, okay? Yes?
Are you able to take everything off except for that?
Absolutely. You want to do that now?
Absolutely, sure. Sure. Yep. That's good.
Let's see, wetlands.
One of the biggest challenges, as I alluded to,
I
was
think this is it right here.
how do we show all this information so you can still see the parcels and still see all the layers? That was
Does that help? Can you see that okay? You want me to zoom in?
Expand it a little bit.
Pardon me?
No, expand it a
Sure.
little bit.
So this is IF&W and DEP?
Pardon me?
This is the IF&W and DEP?
Yep.
IF&W, I don't know about DEP, okay? This is mostly, Inland Fishery and Wildlife has a group called Begin with Habitat, and they provide all kinds of habitat, everything from deer yards to all kinds of stuff, okay? So I don't know what DEP does. Maybe they do something similar. I'm not
I
sure.
just saw it on the legend.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
All right, any questions or?
Thank you.
Turn those back on, Doug, or do you want to move on to?
Are we through development constraints?
Well, we've
or-
gotten all the, let me
all
turn
the-
everything back on just to be sure there's nothing. Yeah, that's it for,
So let's, while we're here, let's, so when you look at it from a town-wide perspective, and I tried to print those large enough for everyone to see, but maybe we could go into while
Libby
we're
Hill.
here, to the Libby Hill area. The slopes, I think, will show up quite well. And let's see, there's some wetlands as you get to the far side of Maplewood. Trying to think where else there are wetlands. Bear Brook, yep. So this is and I should have mentioned earlier, the maps that are on, all of the maps that are on the town website through the link, all of those are PDF and they're zoomable. So you can zoom in, just as we zoomed in right here, right now. You can do that at home on your own computer. So I think the big point is that if you look at the whole town, it looks overwhelming. But if you watch the layers get assembled layer by layer, or you zoom in, and if you've got the legend right in front of you, it's a lot more understandable. And that, of course, was done intentionally.
as the maps get more finalized, there will be a live, not a PDF, but a live version of what you're seeing right here on the website, so you can turn layers off and on and zoom in the way you want to. The PDFs are great for zooming in, but you begin to lose detail at some point in time as you zoom in, as you can imagine. Whereas these maps, the online live GIS stuff, you can zoom in quite close and still maintain a lot of detail. Okay?
And when would that be, when we get finalized?
Down the road
Be
sometime.
determined?
To be, yep, that's part of, yeah, that's akin to the question that Pam understandably asked. So let's go through the compilation of, or questions on the development constraints map. Let's start with that while we're here. And any questions on how that got put together, or, yes?
Can you just remind me again of what the heavy black dotted things mean?
Those are the future land use polygons. It's on the, with your handout, it's on the back page of the agenda. Back side of the agenda. The future land use, I call them the future land use polygons. That's what I call them. There's the village growth.
It was in the comp plan itself. There we go.
Yep. There's the village growth. Maybe you could zoom out a teeny
Sure.
bit.
Yeah.
And maybe over to the village. So here, yep, that's great. So here is the village growth core extending up just past Libby Hill. And then if you look at your map, it transitions to the dry mills. So right where my finger is right here, that's the dry mills transition. And this right here is the general rural. And where my hand is right here, that is the critical rural. So those are I call them the polygons because they're different shapes. And so, because there were too many colors, but also because they're important, we wanted to show them on all the maps. That's why they're retained. So, yep, sure. Other questions on how the development constraints map got put together? So, okay, good. Let's switch gears if we can,
Yeah, I'll need
Mr. Al,
just a minute to play.
to the future, the proposed future non-village. And the reason that we're making a conscious effort to differentiate the non-village from the village, as I mentioned it at the beginning, my marching orders were to start on the outside and work my way in. They're working on the village, and then we'll fill in the areas in between. So we're trying to make it clear that, yes, there is the effort that I'm working on for the non-village area, but simultaneously, there's the VTP, the Village Transformation Project, that's working on the village. And the town's goal is to marry those together, and once we have consensus on what the village is going to be and the outer periphery, we can fill in the areas in between. So, okay, so let's step through. So again, we're starting with a blank base map, if you will. The wrong notes here. And so I mentioned there were three main principles that were used to draw the lines for the proposed non-village zoning districts. The future land use polygons, right here. The development constraints that we just touched on, and property lines. So the first layer is the rural conservation. I think that the title of a zoning district should be as descriptive as possible as to its overall character. I understand that it was called critical rural in the comprehensive plan, but the comprehensive plan also has an accompanying description for that, for the critical rural, and it said it should be the area of town that is most protected from development. And so that's why I termed this rural conservation. So that's the green here. And then the second layer is rural agricultural. And those are areas that are predominantly agricultural. And then maybe the rural residential.
Yep.
And one of the proposals that I'm throwing on the table for input for the council's consideration is for many years the town has had the RRA district, rural residential and agricultural. The example that I like to use is the half-acre lots just north of Hannaford, Spruce, Adler, Fairview, a lot of those lots. Those are half-acre lots. It's a residential area. It's probably always going to be a predominantly residential area. Those lots are in the same zoning district as all of the gravel pits on Mail. I don't think that makes sense. I think it's time for the town of Gray to separate out what's predominantly agricultural and what's predominantly residential. So on the map here, the differentiation between the pink, the rural and agriculture, and the RR, rural residential, is an attempt to do that based on the elements that I outlined: future land use, property lines, and development constraints. So that's an important element of what's being proposed here, is that this is a deviation. Every 10 or 20 years, a municipality with a new comprehensive plan has the ability to revisit what it wants to be. Gray is at one of those crossroads. We had the 2003 comp plan, and for those that were here then when Hannaford went in, this will come up on point as we talk about the commercial area. The 2003 comprehensive plan did not contemplate commercial development in the Libby Hill area. The town council in 2003 ended up putting the question before the voters as to, do you want to amend the comprehensive plan for the purposes of amending the zoning to allow Hannaford to go there? It was a threshold moment, arguably, for the town of Gray, and it goes in line. Growth Management Act, comprehensive plan, zoning. The then council, 2003, was actually after that. It was 04, 05, around then. But the 2003 comprehensive plan needed to be amended in order for the council to change the zoning. And so the council put that question before the voters to help them make the decision as to whether or not that should happen. So that's sort of some background for those that were not here. I was not working for the town, but I remember driving through, and there were a lot of posters. Some were in favor and some were not, and that's good. That's the democratic process. So that is the distinction that I'm proposing between the rural residential and the rural and agricultural. Next is the rural mixed use.
Residential.
Okay.
Residential.
Residential, and if you zoom in a little bit, so this is the residential. The yellow, it's a little bit of a fine tune. You can see it right here. There are areas at Dry Mills. There are areas, Spruce Adler Fairview area. Many of those areas have half-acre lots. They are currently residential. They're probably always going to be residential. I think it's time, similar to the RR and RA separation, I think it's time for the town to step up and protect those areas as residential areas, a true residential district. We don't have one of those right now. And I think it's time I'm proposing that that's something that the town consider. So next is the residential mixed use, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, and we should, it would be great, with the discussion. So this is, and there's some, what are they called? Crib notes. In your packet, on the last page, both sides, there's a spreadsheet, and it's color-coded to this, and it has the proposed title of the district, it has some sample uses, and it has some sample standards. So you'll see, as an example, that the residential area, set back a little bit from 26 here, is slightly different from the residential mixed use. The residential mixed use area is proposing to have limited commercial uses that would not adversely affect the predominant residential nature. As an example, if you had a professional office building or other types of commercial uses, the hours would be limited so that when people come home at night, they're not being adversely affected by the commercial commercial use. I call it light commercial, or there's another term that I use for that, but professional offices, I believe there's some examples on that spreadsheet. I don't know if I have that, but the spreadsheet that's on the handout has some sample uses and sample standards. And I'm not being able to put my hands on that right now, but it's on, here we go. Here it is, right here. So, good neighbor standards, the no evening hours, neighborhood commercial, that's the term I was trying to remember. And there would be buffers to the residential district. So as an example, if there were a commercial use on one of the blue residential mixed use parcels, and that was butting up to a residential district, there would be a buffer that would be an integral part of the approval for the non-residential use there to protect the residential nature of the true, the yellow, the true residential. So that, and let's see, I guess commercial. That's the next, isn't it? Yep. Commercial. So this is a strictly for these two areas. And there were quite a few questions about this at the Dry Mills workshop a week ago, Monday. The commercial district information that's on the spreadsheet that you have in your handout, at this point anyway, is only for these two commercial areas. There are very likely going to be other commercial areas in the village, in the transition districts, and so forth. So these, the red, the commercial that is shown on this map and on the spreadsheet are intended to, the sample uses and the sample standards are just for these two areas. Most of this area is currently zoned BT, business transition. That's where the council landed after the vote when Hannaford wanted to go there. So most of this is either BT1, business transition, BT1 or BT2. There are a series of performance standards in the zoning ordinance that limit hours and so forth. And so that if this is becoming a commercial area, the proposal is to see if there is support for that to continue to be a commercial area. So I guess next is, and we could just step through these, and we're just about to comment and question land here.
The overlay districts.
Let's do wellhead. There's wellhead there. So this is the wellhead. Wellhead 1. Wellhead protection, this is currently Wellhead 1, proposed to be its own district. And we're going to get to it in just a minute. This is actually, this outline is Wellhead 2. That's proposed to be an overlay with standards similar to that which are on the books. Shoreland, there are no changes proposed to shoreland. The way the shoreland zoning statute is written, any changes to the shoreland zoning ordinance or the shoreland zoning map have to be approved by the state. Those have been periodically amended and updated as required. So shoreland's in pretty good shape, I think, and we've got enough moving parts and enough changes here. I said, okay, let's just leave shoreland just like it is. It has its own, the zoning ordinance is for chapter 402, shoreland's 403. So we're going to leave that alone. So there are 4 overlays. This is the first proposed overlay, which is exactly the parameters of the current wellhead 2. The second proposed overlay is aquifers, which show up, they're a little bit hard to see. If you zoom in, they show up a little bit better, but you can see that they look like a wave, if you will. Almost like an underground lake. So I like that. Another overlay, if you want to zoom out maybe a little bit, Al, if you can. These are the future growth areas. One of the comments from the council was that at some point in the future, the town may want to allow slight additional uses and or additional density for areas that might connect to roads. We talked about this a little bit at the Dry Mills workshop where the ring road, and so this road right here as an example, if you look at the numbers for the future growth areas are just for discussion purposes. The numbers don't mean anything. It's just so we can talk about growth area number 3 or what have you. So this growth area number 2 as an example might connect Yarmouth Road to Portland Road, and then potentially longer term Portland to Center, and then the Center Road Bridge over the Turnpike is coming up for rebuilding in about 5 years, 4 years, 5 years. And there have been some discussions at a council level that bridge would get switched, if you will, so it would be able to connect, go over Center to be able to connect over to Turnpike Acres, thank you. Turnpike Acres, and switch the bridge over the Turnpike, and so that connects you to Center, and then potentially even longer term Center over to West Gray. So the point of the ring roads obviously is to decrease the volume of traffic through the village. The more of these ring roads you have, then people will take these because they're easier and they avoid the congestion in the village, and this is an integral part of the discussions that are part of the village transformation project as well. If we can reduce the cumulative volume of traffic through the village, it helps all the way around. And so these growth areas are intended, the proposed future growth areas are intended to be sort of like a flag, an indicator that in the future there may be additional uses or additional density in these areas to either current or future property owners. And then the last overlay, and then we're just about to question and comment land here, I hope, is the watershed boundary. Right now on the current zoning map, virtually all of this, except the village, is RRA, and this, where my hand is right here, is Lake District. And I'm proposing that the watershed this be an overlay. So we didn't talk about overlays, I meant to do that. So an overlay district, so the way zoning works, you have the underlying district. It's kind of like the layers of acetate on the overhead projectors. You've got your underlying zoning, and then you have additional standards with an overlay. An overlay can either add uses or it can make them more restrictive. It can do either. For the purposes of an aquifer overlay, it would probably limit the uses. It might limit, as an example, uses that would potentially contaminate the aquifer. The future growth area overlay might add uses and or density. And so the watershed overlay would be an additional set of environmental standards designed to minimize the contamination of the surface waters because they're in the direct watershed of the ponds. Great Ponds are called. Crystal, Little Sebago, Forest, and Notchin. So those are the 4 overlays. And again, an overlay can either add or subtract. So you've got 2 different standards. Whenever you have an overlay, you've got the underlying district, but you also are subject to the additional provisions of the overlay district. That's an overlay. Everyone thinks overlays just do one thing. They can do both. So with that...
Talk about transition.
Transitions, yes. Thank you. So as I said, the direction that I was provided was to start on the outside of town and work while the village was working on their part of it. And as a practical matter, I needed a place to stop. And so the transition districts were that logical place to stop. And I tried to put some, what I thought anyway, if you go down Portland Road maybe, I tried to put some logical breakpoints in. If you could go down Portland Road, P1, P2, P3. And so, yeah, so, and another one of the guiding principles that the council said is, let's not have proposed commercial districts that are not able to be practically used for that purpose. And that's where the development constraints come in. And so what I tried to do with the not just the proposed zoning districts, but also with the transition districts, you can see this is wetland, this is slopes. It's currently zoned commercial, but you can't use it for that purpose. So I tried to create sort of different P1, P2, and then there's P3 down there. So the transition once there's consensus on the outer periphery, and once there's consensus on the village, we can begin to fill in the specifics of the transition districts. I did propose, it's not on the handout, but it is on the online information, excuse me. I proposed some general characteristics of the transition districts. The example that I like to use is Yarmouth Road. There's already a lot of commercial traffic through the village from Yarmouth Road, so I'm proposing it's not as colorful, not as pretty as the one that's in your handout, but there's a spreadsheet like this in the online version, and the Yarmouth, the Y1, Y2, Y3, those are generally proposed to be pretty much residential for the purposes of not having additional volumes of commercial traffic going through the village. And so I understand there's going to be a propensity to want to talk about the specific uses in the transition districts. We're not really there yet. We need consensus on the outer periphery. We need to know what's going on with the village, and then we can figure out what's going on in the transition areas. I put the general descriptions in the packet that's online for the purposes of hopefully getting some comments as we begin to sharpen our pencils and fine-tune what's going to happen in those transition districts. So
Can I add something real quick?
I guess that's...
If I could real quick, Doug tried to be very, very practical with these district borders. And wherever possible, we tried to follow parcel boundaries, just because it's going to be easier wherever these boundaries end up being. It'll be easier if you're following existing property line. However, there's times where it's just not practical. Like, I don't know who owns this parcel right here, but you can see this parcel has two different zones. Maybe in this one too, perhaps that one could be changed. I guess my point I'm trying to make is we generally try to follow parcel boundaries, but sometimes it's just not practical to do that. Doesn't mean it's set in stone, but these are a guide, folks. It's just a guide to get people started asking questions and trying to express what your concerns are and come to some kind of solid ground with it. Okay. Did you want to zoom into Libby Hill before we?
Yeah, let's zoom into Dry Mills. Libby Hill, please.
These maps make so much more sense when you zoom in on them.
And there's there's a copy of this obviously in your packet, and there is an enlargement over there. It's a little bit far away. So that's kind of my dog and pony show, and happy to address. Let's see, I could start with Pam's question, maybe from earlier.
A couple of them. If you're able to do this with the maps.
Sure.
Obviously, some of the acreage is
pretty sensitive.
Some of the acreage is going to be increased in density. So could you show on the map the areas that have half-acre proposals, which is residential and then residential mixed use, I believe?
Yes, you just want to see just those layers?
those.
Yeah, give me a second, I can do that.
Oh, you want to see it on the map? Okay.
On the map. Yep.
Okay. me turn off the shoreline zoning here once I. There, I think that's what you're looking for there, I believe.
So
Are you
no,
looking for town-wide or Libby Hill?
townwide, no,
Townwide.
townwide. I'm just getting an idea of the sense of the increased, either residential or business proposals for reduced acreage, you know.
Okay. Commercial probably
Commercial.
as well.
Yep,
Maybe, can we turn the commercial on?
Oh.
Yep, so it would be, I could stay near this mic. So it would be proposed residential areas, proposed residential mixed use, and proposed commercial, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we got those residential.
so just to get an idea of the impact in certain areas that maybe have an impact in, you know, if you're talking about Libby Hill, or you talk about Dry Mills, what are those
Yep.
areas that are going to have impact with reduced, increased density?
Okay.
Do you want me to zoom into those
Yeah.
individually, or is this adequate for what you're looking for?
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. And the other question I had was, basically, I know we're supposed to be working on the outside going in and waiting for the center of town to develop what their criteria is for transition areas. But I would like to have, once they've decided, another public hearing so that we know what's going on and that we can see what kind of impacts they're going to be in those transition areas such as Dry Mills and Libby Hill or wherever. It would be nice to have
Okay.
another
Yep.
powwow, I guess.
Of course, I can't speak for the council, but I would assume that they would be receptive to that and that they would want that input, similar to the approach that why we're here tonight.
Yeah.
Again, I can't speak for the
You did.
for the council, but I think that I believe that's where they're headed.
Or maybe just an overall public hearing, you know, for certain areas for the town. You know, after everybody's made a decision, an overall public hearing, just to kind of get a flavor of what the final thing is going to look like and have some input on that.
Public hearing and/or maybe even a workshop similar to this, where there can be communication back and forth. And
Yep, that would be great.
all right.
Thanks.
Did I understand correctly that the areas that are in yellow, which are the half-acre residential areas, those already exist?
Most
May
of
not be at full capacity, but they are already half-acre lots in that area?
No.
I would say that it's a hybrid. I would say that some areas, you're correct, probably half to 2/3 of those areas are already half-acre lots. But there are some areas, to be fair, around
Dry Mill.
around Dry Mills where there are some larger parcels that are proposed. And that's part I don't really, the hope is to solicit input focusing on Libby Hill tonight.
Exactly.
When we had the Dry Mills workshop a week ago, Monday,
Yep.
that was on the table, if you will, and it's on the table tonight too, don't
Well, I
get me
didn't
wrong.
realize, I didn't put two and two together until I said, well, let's take a look at what it would look like
Mhm.
over the town,
Mhm.
as far as that type of proposal. Okay.
And the residential areas looked at where is there public water, and there were a lot of different elements that went into it. But in answer to your question, some areas are already half-acre lots and some areas are not half-acre lots, but the primary reason why the additional proposed residential area is proposed at Dry Mills is to support the commercial, if that's the decision, to support the small commercial area so you have a vibrant village there. So there was, and I'm glad there was, a lot of discussion about that at the Dry Mills workshop.
And just further, the impact in the Dry Mills area by Crystal Lake will have a high impact on the traffic on North Raymond Road as well as the lake itself.
Yep.
Just, yeah.
Yep, there were many good comments to that effect at the workshop. And I see probably maybe about half of the people that tonight were at Dry Mills. That's great. That's why we undertook the postcard. Do people like just in general, do people like the postcard? Was it
I think it was
helpful?
helpful. I think
Any?
it drew attention.
Okay, any?
I got both of mine a week late, so it was great.
That's because you only check your mail once every 2 weeks, Adam.
Okay.
Adam, you gotta check your mail more often.
But in general, the postcard sort of got your attention and it was helpful, provided some helpful, okay, because we,
Town newsletter was nice.
okay, very good. Newsletter, yep, so, I'm more of the zoning technical guy, but Kyle was great with the stuff, so. So, if we can, we'd like to, if people can pick up the mic. Yeah. Could you repeat the question? We're trying to, for the recording. It's pretty good.
Do you anticipate the minimum lot size will increase for the property in the critical rural zone?
Yes, and so one of the distinctions that you'll see in the spreadsheet that's in your handout is there's been some discussion at an ordinance advisory committee level about this, is to make a distinction between minimum lot size and density. And if you look at the title of the column, I hope it made its way into the spreadsheet. I know it did on mine. Yes, it does. It's the the fifth column over. It says density / lot size. And so, particularly for the proposed rural conservation and perhaps the rural and agricultural district, you'll see that it on the spreadsheet there it says 3 to 5 acre density for RC and 2 to 3 acre density for RA. And then if you go down to the other districts, you'll see it talks about lot size. So the objective here is to, in line with the comp plan's intentions of conserving the RC areas, the intention is to switch to density for those districts. So that, let's say you had a 10 or 15 acre parcel in the RC area. You would be able to put, let's say, 3-5 houses on that, but maybe they would be clustered towards the road and the back portion would be left pretty much untouched. So it's trying to get away from minimum lot size and move towards density for those more rural protected districts. So in effect, if you were to compare the current RRA to the proposed RC, the effect would be to increase the lot size through applying this density standard. The comment is that if you owned property in the proposed RC area that's currently RRA, such a property owner would be forced to sell more property because the lot size would be larger. I'm not doing a very good job. It's a hard concept to convey without sort of some illustrations here, but the objective is to try if you're going to try to switch from minimum lot size to minimum density, the objective is to try to realize the same or slightly less density of development, but concentrate that development, let's say close, not on the road, but on a certain portion of the property, and then have the remaining portion not get developed. And so if you had a series of, let's say you had 3 or 4 lots along an existing road, and each of those lots were 10 acres, you would be able to get so 10 acres. You would be able to get let's say three times 3 would be 9. 2 or 3 houses on each 10-acre lot, but those houses would be at the front, and then there would be, the vision is that there would be a requirement that a certain percentage, 60-something%, would be untouched, and that the houses would be focused on the front. And that's forwarding the purposes of the Rural Conservation District. If that type of development happens, then the backland, if you will, for these 3 10-acre lots along the road would be forwarding the purposes of the Rural Conservation District, because it wouldn't be developed. So it would be less dense, but we're trying to get away from lot size. Yep, and I understand that there are some large lots out there. The switching from minimum lot size to maximum density is a little bit of a stretch, and I understand there are big lots out there. In some cases, you may actually have maximum lot sizes, and so if you had 100 acres, and you had a maximum lot size of 15 acres, and you had the density from somewhere from 3 to 5 acres per dwelling unit, that's what's being contemplated.
But a smaller lot wouldn't be, to his point, a smaller lot wouldn't be allowed.
Yes, the comment was smaller lot wouldn't be allowed. That's correct.
But you are encouraging some kind of clustering of the housing, even if it's on larger lot sizes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And towards the road.
Closer to there'd be a road setback. I believe the spreadsheet says deep road setbacks in RC for the rural character. We talked about that at the Dry Mills workshop. But it's really for someone that went to school for planning a lot of years ago, switching from minimum lot size to density. It's really a paradigm shift. But the intention is to forward the objectives of, in particular, the RC district. But there would be performance standards that would specify the minimum area of this fictitious 10-acre lot that would not get developed at all, with the exception of maybe trails, or if it was agricultural, something like that. But there wouldn't be houses there.
Right. So I think the gentleman has a good point. That's just I was trying to understand, and thank you for delving into this. But it would further the purpose of the RC even further if the lot sizes were smaller, and because you would be allowed to then set aside a greater proportion of the parcel for open space or conservation.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get it, yeah.
All right.
That's a good distinction. Yep. So there might be. It would be sort of one layer more complicated, because there would be a minimum lot size, but associated with that minimum lot size, there would be a standard that would require a certain area be set aside. It's almost like a mini residential open space subdivision.
Yeah,
actually.
Greater clustering and
Yes.
smaller lot sizes, but allowing
Okay.
a greater portion of the parcel to be untouched.
Especially if there's land trust involved, it seems like even undeveloped parcels, part of the parcel couldn't be into a land trust. Is that your concern? Is that correct? Like if this happened, even if the lot, part of the lot was left to be undisturbed natural forest or whatever, the land trust couldn't buy that because it's part of another parcel. It's different.
The land trust can't buy, the town forced it to be created.
Right.
The land trust can't buy a portion of
Right.
their
I understand
lot.
what you're saying. Yeah.
They buy the larger,
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
maintain the larger portion as much as possible. I mean, my goal is the same, I think what's being proposed, how do I keep my large lot intact as possible? So I don't want to see, ruling go through that would sort of force it.
Okay. Sure. Okay. That's a good comment. Yeah, the comment was that there may be property owners that have large parcels, and that this approach might be in line with where they would want to end up for their purposes which would be right in line with the towns, but we need to fine tune the mechanics of it to ensure that it is an efficient way to develop the property, but also realize a sufficient number of lots, perhaps a smaller individual lot size, but a set aside that would forward the purposes of the RC district. Yep.
Many of those lots in that area are very large,
Yep. Understood.
That would be our goal.
Okay.
We have to sell a lot.
This thing's pretty good. We can talk about that.
Awesome. Yeah, completely agree with you. We've donated large tracts of land to Land Trust, so we like to do that. 2 questions. One, when is the interactive map going to be available?
Whenever, I mean, it's mechanically, digitally, it's just a matter of setting up and turning it on. It's a question of when does a town want to make this, from a GIS viewpoint,
Right.
anytime. It's a question of when the town, and Doug, I'm wrong, when the town feels they're at a place that this is good to put online. So
Right, but I mean, if it's just a simple matter of turning it on, it's easier to navigate than it is to zoom in and out of the
True.
PDF.
Yep, absolutely.
So, second question, with these proposals, is there going to be any type of road study, traffic study? I mean, if we're talking about making it more commercial, and it's gonna change the traffic flow, is that being taken into consideration, or?
We're not at that point. I think that's a very realistic possibility. The objective at this point, again, coming from the council, was to solicit input from property owners and business owners and residents and see, is there support for this? I mean, again, going back to the workshop that we had at Dry Mills, I think the policy question there is, do you want a village there? And so I think that if we're trying to focus on Libby Hill here, I think the policy question is there support for a small commercial area around Hannaford? And is there support for a residential mixed use and then transitioning into residential? If there's support for that, I think that the next steps would be taken. This is the broad brush. I mean, from a 10,000 foot view perspective, basically these maps are taking the future land use map, which is very generalized, and it's sharpening the pencil quite a bit. This is sort of the interim step, and then the next step will be, is there support, and should we continue to put efforts towards the broad brush lines that have been put on these maps?
Okay, throw something real quick to the group.
Sure.
Real quick. Excuse me, this fairly contiguous piece of land here, it's broken up by parcels, but not by physical things like roads or major. It's kind of becoming a little bit rare in southern Cumberland County. And I'm going to switch hats here. I'm also on the Open Space Committee here in town, and we're always looking for ways to somehow something, I hate to say, but something to enhance whatever, to maintain the idea of, yeah, it's an integral part of the comp plan's goals of keeping Maine rural.
We would agree, we own hundreds of acres of land.
Do you want to be on the Open Space Committee?
She is.
Yeah.
I just wanted to echo what the two larger landowners, I work with the Land Trust, but I think they bring up a good point. I mean, it's really good we've, identified this, as you say, unique, critical rural area. But I think we should start giving some thought, like we do with tree growth, if landowners are gonna help keep it from being developed, there should be some sort of property tax mechanism, which would be an excellent thing the Open Space Committee could work on, is helping these landowners keep it undeveloped, because you're taxing them at whatever level, even if it's at tree growth, that's still tax. And if for some reason they do develop it, then they have to pay it back, like with the tree tax. But I think they bring up really good points, as you can identify it, but there's a lot of pressure on those landowners to try to, balance the books between, keeping it as it is and then paying you guys to come here tonight and put it on.
In today's development that's going on, the tree growth tax is like, I don't know, urinating on a forest fire, to be so blunt. That's what it's like. Tree growth tax doesn't really reduce development that much. We figured out one time, someone was going to develop a large tract of land, was in tree growth, and they had to pay a $40,000 penalty. That's like part of a pickup truck, right, Adam? $40,000? That's not much to a developer. So it's a great idea, a great concept, but it was put together back in the 60s or 70s when there's much less development pressure. And in today's world, it doesn't hinder that much.
But couldn't you assess if a property is in this critical area and it still remains no residential? We have the ability as the tax assessor to assess that differently. Maybe that has to be built into the tax assessment rules. If this area is that critical, then let's put the money where our mouth is.
Sure.
But I think what he's saying is the penalty to withdraw it from tree growth isn't enough
No.
to prevent anybody from doing it. I did it. Yeah. It's painful, but it's doable. So that penalty needs to be fixed.
So I got a couple of things. One's kind of a follow-up to the gentleman's comments, but first, the commercial triangular area by Hannaford, I would be in support of it, and I think it's a good idea, and I can explain why. I grew up in that area. My mom still lives there. I know all the neighbors there. And I can tell you when Hannaford went in, which has been a blessing to the town, it's good for everybody. But it cut our little residential 4 or 5 dwellings off, more or less, from anything else residential. So for years we've called it the Bermuda Triangle because you've got a small residential area that's got commercial, turnpike, fire department, municipal, and we've been kind of isolated. So it really leaves the homeowners in that area. You really don't have a lot of choice to try to sell that as a residential area because it's not, you buy a house there, it's kind of like Talladega Corner, especially on Thursday nights. It's not exactly the quaint little residential place where I grew up, and it wasn't that long ago when I grew up there. So I'm in favor of that because I think it's the relevant use in the area. To comment on that gentleman's speaking about tree growth and such, I know this isn't necessarily the forum for tax stuff, but we've got a large piece of property ourselves, and during last year's equalization project, I feel the large landowners really got hurt, and they got hurt because anybody who's got any acreage in the town of Gray, on that tax bill, if you look at the land card, it gives you like a tiered approach to your valuation of your property. Prior to this year, up to so many acres, it was $3,000 for the first 10 acres. And then from 10 to 20 acres, say it was $2,500. From 20 to 50, it was $1,500. And then anything 50 acres or more was valued at $750 for tax purposes. As a result of our latest equalization, that tiered approach went to $6,000 for the first portion, $5,500 to the second, $5,000 for the third, and then 50 acres or more, they now value at $4,500 per acre for tax purposes. So if you look at an increase of $750 per acre, which it was last year, to $4,500 per acre this year, that's a 600% increase in anybody that's got 50 acres or more. So the biggest issue I see with these rural conservation districts is that you've got landlocked landowners with timber on it, or tree growth. If you've got a piece of property, if you just do the simple math, a piece of property that may be in the, 250 acre range, something out in the middle of the woods somewhere. Say last year your taxes were $3,000 or $4,000 on it, and like I said, I'm not accurate on tree growth stuff, but just for example, if you run the new numbers with the new values, those properties are worth 250. The taxes rather could have gone up to as much as 15,000 on that same parcel. I know this for a fact because I've talked to large landowners who have land that virtually is useless land. It's bad enough that solar panel companies won't even put solar panels on it because they won't float well enough. But their tax bills have gone from a few thousand to 15,000 for land that literally isn't even good enough for any other use. So my biggest fear for these people who are trying to keep their land in open space, keep it in tree growth, is that they can't cut enough trees to pay the taxes. And if they cut the land extremely, extremely hard, they strip it. Say you get 20 or 30,000 or 40,000 for it, that's 2 or 3 years taxes. Now you've got a landowner who has stripped all the value off their property, they're landlocked, they can't develop it, and the abutter doesn't want to buy it because they're in the same boat. So the tax structure, I feel, plays into this a little bit with the conservation of these lands, because you're going to have landowners who are going to get in a desperate state that they've got a piece of land they can't afford to keep, and they can't sell it because it's got no value and it's landlocked. So
That's already true. I mean, that's already.
absolutely,
You can't, like you said, you can't harvest trees.
you can't cut them fast enough.
It's
Yeah.
not possible.
So I-
That's why, periodically, every 5 years, we have to sell a house loan.
Absolutely.
That builds up the bank account, and that allows us to pay the taxes. So that hence my question, I would like to sell it as little as possible, so that we can maintain the piece, maybe someday it's sold to a land trust.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, those are just other things. Yeah, it's just, there are some other things that large landowners are fighting, obviously, and it's I call it the unequalization a little bit, because, our properties, I'll try and make it as short as possible, but our properties have, since 2017, we've got 2 gravel pits in town. Our properties have gone up over 1,000% each in less than 8 years. We can't go up on our rates 1,000%. If we did, everybody in here would be throwing darts at us.
Or rocks.
Or rocks, or anything. They'd be running us over twice, forward and back. But, so to try and conserve land, it's not just what the uses are, it's also having the town with a tax strategy that doesn't penalize you for large lots. Right now, I do feel large landowners are getting penalized, even despite their best efforts to keep it undeveloped. So that's part of it too.
Okay. Very good. That's a good exchange of ideas and practical realities. Understood.
Experience.
Yes, you've been at it a while, I know. So, very good discussions. Please don't misunderstand me. I wonder if the focus of tonight was to the reason that we came on the road with our dog and pony show was to try to get input with regards to Libby Hill. Lost my notes here. There's some relevant background here for probably most people here remember this, but I mentioned the former AOZ. There are currently no aquifer standards. We talked about the town decision in 03 with the 03 comp plan, BT1. So then there was the Route 26 corridor study right around 2015. The future land use plan in the comp plan has most of the Libby Hill area in village mixed use growth. And so I guess what I'm wondering, and if there are no more comments on Libby Hill, I'm happy we can delve down other paths. But what I'm wondering, I wonder if we could zoom into the Libby Hill area. What I'm wondering is if there are comments with regards to the proposed residential area and the residential mixed use and the commercial. The workshop on the 24th at Pennell is supposed to be more of a town-wide, but the hope was to solicit input for the dry mills proposal at the prior workshop, and the hope was to solicit input for the Libby Hill area at tonight's workshop. So again, happy to go back into larger discussions, but they're all good input, very good. Yep. So I guess what I'm wondering is if there is any input, comments, positives, negatives, concerns with regards to the Libby Hill area, because I was hoping to solicit some of that if I could tonight. So.
Just the blue boot that's on I guess that would be the south side of Libby Hill Road. How far up Libby Hill does that go? Is that like up to the high school, or is that?
Yes.
Yep.
Just to the high school?
Yep.
Okay.
And those were existing lots, and let's see, village mix, let's see, I'm just noticing now that the Norway Savings Bank lot is on there, but that's already there. So, yep, sure.
I like the idea that as the town, the center of town, and then you may have higher density outside the center of town. So you encourage higher density for residential and for commercial, and then be able to assess that area, see how that impacts, see what kind of businesses you get, or what kind of residential impacts you have to your town, because you're going to have impacts with traffic and schools. If you have residential, your schools are going to be affected. All those matrix, but I'd rather see it go from the center of town out and go from there. But I do like the idea of higher density in that area, because it seems like it's where it's going.
So you're advocating higher density in the village and not necessarily in the Libby Hill area?
No, in the Libby Hill area.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
expand to the Libby Hill area. You have you have your center of town, and then outside as you grow, you should have your denser development where you have your water and things that are happening there anyway, and expand upon that.
Yep.
Like a balloon.
Burgess's concentric zone theory,
Yep.
they call it, where it goes at different rings of
Yep.
intensity of development.
And then assess what impacts that's had, and then go further after that.
Do you think the size is appropriate, or what's the consensus? Is the size of the proposed commercial area and the size of the proposed residential mixed use, is that, and then it kind of morphs, if you will, to the true residential, the yellow behind that? Does that sort of intuitively make sense?
I think it's good for now.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I know there was some pretty substantial pushback with the Route 26 corridor study. This is sort of a baby to what was proposed for that. So.
Yeah, Dan, I just want to go on to say what you guys have done for this Libby Hill area, just like when we heard your talk on the Dry Mills area. As landowners around that, we couldn't be more pleased with the discussion that's going on so far.
Very good, thank you. Yep, and we talked about this at Dry Mills, but for folks that weren't there, the full intention was to put all the different thoughts on the table for the purposes of sparking discussion to enable the town, the council, to make informed decisions. So some of these are bold steps, like with Dry Mills, to propose to go beyond the future land use map in the comp plan. But I think this is as I said before, this is a moment in time for the town of Gray to explore what options you might want to consider. It doesn't happen all the time. So, Susan.
I couldn't hear Pam completely, so I hope I'm not regurgitating. When I think of last week?
We could go Monday. Dry Mills.
It was last week. Just last week.
Just last week, we talked about the Dry Mills area, and that was a great conversation. And when I was looking forward to coming tonight, we talked about the Libby Hill Road, etc. And but I understand that it's going to be a really positive thing. But I'm thinking about, do we have any idea of the future plans of the Pulsifer land that was sold to the school district, which is right off from Libby Hill Road, and what that may do to generate, I think that's kind of an important piece for traffic-wise, whatever they're going to do with it, develop it something which way, what kind of use. So I just thought maybe that would be something to put into the mix.
And my understanding is that the SAD purchased the backland, if you will, what you're calling the Pulsifer piece. And that was.
Can you repeat the question? Yes, thanks.
His question was, do we have the camera's over there. Do we have a handle on what the SAD intends to do with the portion of the, before we lost Phil, the Pulsifer property, because it's such a large parcel and it could have an impact on surrounding land and traffic and everything. It's about 20 acres. Yeah, that's,
Which piece is that there?
it's, let's see, the Pulsifer piece, yeah, if you need to see Shaker, this piece, I believe it's this piece. Is that the Pulsifer piece? I believe so.
Right there.
It's what, this one? It's one of those two, I believe.
It's the one that transitions from blue to orange, I think.
This piece.
Yeah, right in there.
Fairview. Yeah, that was the old electric contractor. I think it's this piece right here.
I mean, I'm not adverse to traffic and the needs of all of our students and children and stuff. I'm just saying, I think it's kind of, it's right there, and that's going to.
Yep.
Exactly. Everything went straight up through. We already know what the light is like at the end of the road.
Yep.
You know, so I'm just thinking about what kind of use will it be and what
So the comment is that it would be good to get a handle on where the SAD may be headed with the use of that parcel. I have met with the SAD just as I met with the water district. But.
How close, can you show us how close, Western those 20 acres, how close that impacts some prior period property that I think is.
The Durgan piece. How many, can you see, who owns this piece here, do we know?
This one here.
Yeah.
Isn't that,
It's probably, it would be in, it'd be in Trio, it'd be the property owner.
yeah, I don't have it on this.
That's okay, that's okay. Okay.
I thought Merrill owned that piece.
The Merrill is, I know that one.
Ann might know.
Yeah. So, other comments about the, oh, sure, yes, please.
I noticed when I was looking at some maps the other day that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are two parcels east of the Libby Hill, the end of the road, or in that area, between there and all of the tree growth, that are labeled as Gray Community Endowment?
That's a nonprofit that exists in Gray, a 501c3 that owns some land up on Libby Hill.
Okay. And then there's another part, thank you. And there's another parcel that I think just says Town of Gray, or maybe says Gray.
That's the Libby Hill property
Yeah,
on the top.
But,
the town of Gray.
Belongs to the
owns that.
Town of Gray.
Right.
It was donated to the town, yeah.
And how are those things, how are they zoned?
So as a practical matter, what most people understandably call Libby Hill Trails is actually a compilation of a couple different entities, and you've named two, and I believe there's some more. There's also some properties that have some easements on them as well.
It's those three, the school district, Gray Community Endowment, and the town that make up the Libby Hill Trail system, or the land that the Libby Hill Trail system is built for.
Because they are currently Libby Hill Trails, and because that seems to be a very valued, understandably it is, community asset, and because they're in the critical rural on the comprehensive plan, those areas, if they're not proposed to be rural conservation, they're certainly intended to be. I think I tried to cover the bases on that, because that's a hand in glove real world example of the comprehensive plan, something that's important to the community and proposed zoning all coming together for everyone's benefit. So, other comments about Libby Hill or the proposal here? We're got about, 25 minutes, I guess, or my eyes are, my old eyes here. What time is it? We've got about 25 minutes, yep. If there are other questions or comments, again, there's the third workshop coming up on the 24th, but this has been really good input, and if there are other comments, that was a really good discussion about the RC and how to most practically go about that. It's encouraging that there's support for that approach, and that's exactly why we're here. Is before the council decides what next steps to take. I think they were looking for that broad brush input to see what the residents and property owners are like. So, any other? I'm not a very good used car salesman. I'm too technical, I guess. Oh, you don't want to buy this car; it's no good. Any other comments? I'm happy to field those. Or again, there's the workshop on the 24th. If you have comments that occur to you after tonight, on the introductory page on the town website, and the path to get there is at the bottom of the agenda. You could submit those comments, and as I said earlier, the notes from all of the workshops, as well as all the comments that get submitted through the link that Kyle kindly provided, will make their way to the council. And at this juncture, we anticipate the council discussing this in early April after the final workshop, at least this round of workshops anyway, on the 24th there in Pennell. So.
And you can also, the council members are all listed on the town website, so you can also, if you want to have a conversation with a council member, feel free to call any one of us. Or email. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Councilor Gass. So, okay. Well, thank you all for coming.